Carlos Prates will break Leon Edwards.
Who would you like to face next inside the octagon?
I think Carlos Prates against Leon Edwards. You know, our respect for that guy, but the time is now.
Leon Edwards doesn't say no to anybody.
Leon Edwards is the absolute top of the food chain.
Carlos Prates has turned heads. His striking is among the best that it gets.
He is the nightmare of the welterweight division. He puts guys out.
It was a long time coming, you know. A lot of ups and downs, but my upbringing, my background, gave me the mentality of never giving up.
I want to be one of the best welterweights to ever exist in the UFC.
Yeah, you know, a lot of people say like, Carlos is done already because he's smoky, he's party, and he cannot be a champ. And I'm gonna prove everybody I can be a champ, still smoking, still party, still drinking whiskey, still enjoy the best life.
Carlos vs. Leon are set for the main card of UFC 322, and although a lot of fans are siding with Leon based on his experience and based on his championship pedigree, I'm here to tell you that Carlos will not only beat Leon, but he'll finish him as well. But quickly, before we get the video started, my name is JuicyMMA, I make opinionative MMA content, and if you guys enjoy videos similar to this, hit that subscribe button, as only 10% of you watching are actually subscribed. And if you guys want to support the channel and see more content just like this, be sure to hit that join button for members only live streams, best bets, members only videos, and additional perks as well. But anyways, let's get into it. When you talk about what Carlos Prates has been able to do in the UFC thus far, it's been extremely impressive, as it's very obvious that he has a lot of power, a great chin, and just a knack for finding big finishes. But early on, although Carlos was putting on amazing performances and very fun performances, there was a huge portion of the fan base that didn't really think Carlos was a legitimate contender or was a legitimate champion. And especially in that Ian Machado Gary performance, where it just seemed like Carlos was on the back foot the whole time, and it just seemed like he was outgunned to an extent outside of that fifth round, a lot of fans were a lot lower on Carlos Prates compared to what they were previously. But after Carlos had a beautiful spinning elbow finish on Jeff Neal, the public sentiment changed, and the public sentiment from the UFC especially changed as well, as obviously his next upcoming performance is against a former champion and the current number 4 contender in Leon Edwards. And if Carlos Prates is able to find a victory in this fight, he most likely will get the next title shot at the weight class, or at the bare minimum, he'll be very close to getting the next title shot. And when you talk about the UFC giving an opportunity like that to Carlos Prates, I think it's pretty clear, at the very least from the UFC's perspective, that they believe a lot in this guy and they do want him to become a champion sooner rather than later. So at this point, it's pretty clear that the UFC and a lot of different fans are very high on Carlos Prates. But a question that some of you may be wondering at this point is, why do I think Carlos Prates is going to break Leon Edwards? Well, in my opinion, it comes down to a couple different factors, but the first factor I want to touch upon is the power. Because I mentioned this in a lot of my videos, but I think the power difference between Carlos Prates and Leon Edwards is pretty significant. If Prates is able to land a clean left hand on Leon Edwards, I think there's a good chance this fight could be over. But if Leon Edwards is able to land a couple of clean shots on Carlos Prates, I find it hard to believe that he'll be able to find a finish. So when you have one side that has the ability to end the fight with one shot, regardless of how the fight's going, whether it's going well or whether it's going poorly, I just think that fighter has a significant advantage in any one of those sort of fights. And when you talk about this fight between Leon Edwards and Carlos Prates, I definitely think this is an example of a huge power and a huge physicality advantage for Carlos Prates. But the next factor for why I think Carlos Prates will break Leon Edwards actually comes down to both fighters, and that's pressure. Because a lot of times when you talk about Carlos Prates, when he's able to find his finishes or when he's able to have success, he's always on the front foot, and he always has his opponents behind the black line. And vice versa, when you talk about a lot of Leon Edwards' performances, he's also usually on the back foot. Yes, he does a really good job at fighting off the back foot, and he's been able to have a lot of success over the years, but talking about this specific matchup versus Carlos Prates, I don't think that would be a very effective method to beating Carlos. And because of that fact, I do think a majority of this fight is going to be held with Carlos Prates being on the front foot and Leon Edwards being behind the black line. And at that point, I think Carlos is going to do a good job at lining up his range and essentially fighting at a range where he's able to land shots on Leon and Leon is not able to land shots in return. And at that point, I think it'll be very difficult for Leon to have all that much success. And as I mentioned before, if Carlos is able to land a clean left hand or maybe a clean knee to the body, I do think there is a very good chance we could be talking about an early finish for Carlos Prates. So I definitely do think the pressure is going to be a huge factor in this matchup, especially considering I don't think Leon Edwards is going to really push back on some of that Carlos Prates pressure. But the next factor for why I think Carlos Prates is going to break Leon Edwards is due to the wrestling. Because traditionally when you talk about Carlos Prates, he is a stand-up fighter. But in the Ian Machado-Gary fight, alongside with additional matchups as well, he's shown a really good ability to stop takedowns. And going into this fight, a lot of fans are pointing towards the wrestling from Leon Edwards to be a possible path to victory for Leon. But I think this will be inaccurate because of two separate reasons. The first reason that I mentioned is due to the fact that Carlos has shown really good takedown defense. Yes, he hasn't went up against the highest level wrestlers in the world, but Leon Edwards also isn't a super high level wrestler, so I do think his takedown defense will hold up against Leon. But the second reason for why I don't think the wrestling will be that effective from Leon in this matchup is because, as I mentioned before, I think the majority of this fight is going to be held at a point where Carlos is on the front foot and Leon is on the back foot. And yes, if you're on your back foot, you could find opportunities to shoot in for takedowns and be successful on them, but for the most part, it's much easier to find takedowns when you're on the front foot as compared to when you're on the back foot. So because of those two factors, I don't think the wrestling is really going to play that much of a role in this particular matchup. And of course, all of that isn't even to mention the fact that Carlos has a pretty significant reach advantage in this performance, especially when you talk about Carlos coming off a kickboxing background, and of course, especially when you talk about Carlos having a lot more power than Leon. I think that reach advantage over Leon is going to be even more important in this particular matchup as compared to other matchups in the past. So overall, I do think there are a lot of reasons for why Carlos Prates is going to break Leon Edwards. But if I had to give an official prediction for this matchup, I would lean towards a round 2 TKO or KO victory for Carlos Prates. I think early on in round 1, Leon will have some level of success. Leon obviously is a very talented fighter. He obviously is a former champion, and even on the feet, I do think he could have some success, utilizing his jab, his left straight, maybe utilizing some kicks as well. And early on, I wouldn't be surprised if he had some level of success or even won the first round. But as the fight does progress, I think eventually Carlos is going to get to that point where he's on the front foot. And as I said before, I think eventually Carlos is going to get to a point where he lands that one big seminal blow. Whether it's a spinning elbow, whether it's a knee to the body, whether it's a left straight, whether it's a step in elbow, there's a lot of different weapons that Carlos Prates can go to. And I think, as I said, if he lands one big shot cleanly, I think he'll be able to find a finish not too long after that. And assuming that Carlos is able to find a victory here, especially if he is able to find a beautiful finish victory over Leon Edwards, I think he'll be very close, or maybe he'll even be in line to getting the next title shot at 170 pounds. Now, the interesting thing about this weight class is there's two other potential #1 contender fights as well. As you talk about the fight on the same card in Michael Morales against Sean Brady, but also if you talk about the fight next weekend between Ian Machado-Gary against Belal Muhammad. I think if Ian Machado-Gary wins over Belal and he puts on a great performance, he has a good chance to get the next title shot. I think if Michael Morales beats Sean Brady and he puts on a great performance over him, he gets the next title shot. Or if Carlos Prates is able to beat Leon Edwards and he puts on a fantastic performance, I think he gets the next title shot. I think at the end of the day, it's going to come down to Carlos Prates, Michael Morales, and Ian Machado-Gary. Out of those three guys, whoever wins has a really good chance at getting the next title shot. If all three of those guys win, I think it's going to come down to who put on the best performance. So that's why it's imperative for Carlos Prates not only to beat Leon Edwards, but also to put on a great performance and hopefully for his sake find a finish over a former champion in Leon Edwards. So I guess only time will tell what does end up happening in this performance, but I will say I am extremely excited to see what does. But anyways, let me know what you guys think in the comments. Do you think Carlos Prates will be able to break Leon Edwards, or do you not think so? But anyways, I hope you guys enjoyed the video, and if you did enjoy, check one of these two videos popping up now, and until the next time, peace out guys.